Hello everyone, welcome to week 11, the final substantive week for this course. This week we'll look at electronic commerce or e-commerce. While this content isn't accessible, it's a great opportunity for you to reflect on what you've learned in this unit and how developing technologies are likely to shape commercial law in the future. Accordingly, while there's some content that we'll cover in these videos, what I'd really like you to do is use the critical thinking skills that you've refined throughout the term to consider what effect online technologies and other developments are likely to have on commercial law in coming years. A great example is the Personal Property Securities Register, which we discussed in week 10. We know that one of the strengths of the PPSR is the way that it clarifies and simplifies identifying security interests. It makes it easy for creditors and buyers alike to check whether a piece of property is subject to a security interest. A logical advancement in this space is to develop a smartphone app to conveniently register security interests and to check the PPSR. What are the advantages of that kind of development? And what kind of challenges arise, for instance, to prevent fraud and to verify the identity of app users? What steps can the law take to mitigate these challenges? These are the kinds of considerations you'll have to address in your career, so it's worth taking the time to discuss them now. The clearest space where we've already seen the law adapt to technology is the regulation of e-transactions. The broad approach has been to treat e-transactions like regular transactions as much as possible, following the same kinds of steps and requirements. Further, electronic means of communication are usually just as valid as traditional methods in the transaction process. For example, in-writing requirements will be satisfied by written electronic communication such as email, while e-signatures have become increasingly sophisticated to reflect widespread acceptance of their use. Despite the ubiquity of electronic communication, it's still generally expected that both parties will consent to the e-communication as a valid part of the transaction and any following dealings. Nearly every modern contract includes a clause providing for e-communication, but the fact that this is still required or seen as a requirement does raise an interesting question about whether e-communication is indeed truly equal to traditional methods. We don't need to consent to post as a valid form of communication, but we do for email. So are the two really the same? In practice, the distinction won't usually matter too much, as the clause in a contract accepting e-communication is invariably accepted as uncontroversial, but it bears thinking about because it reflects a degree of conservatism within the legal profession. When we think about sustainability and the sheer amount of paper generated by hard copies of commercial transactions, is there an onus on us as practitioners to shift the way we think about e-communication and work towards embracing it more fully? Perhaps. Another important element of e-communication as it relates to commerce is the timing of dispatch and receipt for communications. Naturally, this can affect things like the time at which an offer is accepted for a contract or when notice is given in respect of a deadline. The starting point is the postal rule for traditional communication methods, which states that an offer is accepted when the acceptance is communicated to the offeror. In e-communication, such as email, this is deemed to occur when the communication is received by the addressee, which is when the communication first enters the addressee's server. Importantly, this means that the addressee doesn't need to know that the message has been received, and following Bowen Construction and Sky General Services, will be deemed to have been received even if the message gets caught in, say, a spam filter. Another important thing to keep in mind is that the message is only valid if it was sent or authorized by them. This prevents someone being bound, for instance, if their computer was hacked. Next, let's consider three types of specific e-transactions: shrink wrap, click wrap, and browse wrap. Shrink wrap contracts refer to the shrink wrap that encloses many software products. These kinds of products come with extensive rules about how the software can be used, how copyright will apply, choice of forum in a dispute, limitations on warranties, and limitations on remedies. These terms are deemed to have been accepted when the purchaser opens the package. It's also important to keep in mind that because these are standard form contracts, the provisions of the Australian consumer law we discussed in week 8 will apply to shrink wrap contracts, often overriding attempts to exclude liabilities or limit available remedies. A click-wrap agreement is formed on the internet when the user ticks an I agree or I accept button to a series of terms and conditions. Importantly, following usual contract law, a user is deemed to have read those terms even if they haven't. So, as always, it's critical that you do read those terms. Finally, browse wrap is a variation of click wrap, where you can download something, but there's nowhere to click I agree on anything. Instead, there's just a link to view the terms if you so choose. Internationally, the standard is that downloading the thing is taken as accepting the terms, but it hasn't arisen as an issue in Australia and so is so far undecided. Privacy is another critical area of technology and the law, with implications for commerce. You'll be aware from torts that there is no general right to privacy in Australia. However, in response to growing concerns about how data is collected, stored and managed online, the government created national privacy principles in 2010 and the Australian privacy principles in 2014. The 2014 principles have a bit more weight to them and deal with the collection and security of information and how it's managed. It also covers things like unsubscribing from email lists. A sender of marketing material has to include an option to unsubscribe, and if someone does unsubscribe, they have to be removed from the list. Finally, while technology and e-commerce has facilitated tremendous advancements in trade and globalism, it has unfortunately also facilitated crimes. Most notoriously, the dark web serves as a platform for orchestrating horrific crimes, but even social media can be used for cybercrimes like stalking and harassment. These developments present serious challenges to which the law has been slow to catch up. Moving forward, the challenge will be to become better at preempting and dealing with new developments in technology and the way that they interact with commerce, whether criminal or not. And that's where you come in. Now that you're at the end of this unit, you're familiar with the foundational aspects of commercial law, the key relationships between different parties like bailments and the sale of goods. You're across the key principled debates, such as how to strike the balance between too much market regulation and not enough. All of these things will remain central to the way commerce is conducted, and accordingly the way the law responds to facilitating commerce. However, the way that technology layers on top of these elements presents new and interesting challenges. What does a rising gig economy mean for the role of sole tradership in our system? In the information age, are consumer protection laws going too far in taking the onus off buyers to do their own research and look out for their own interests? As new digital technologies emerge, what does this mean for traditional conceptions of what the market looks like? As artificial intelligence and personal robots become more sophisticated, will there come a point where an AI can act as an agent for a principal, and if so, what liabilities would they face? These questions and more confront the commercial lawyers of the future, and having studied this unit, you're well prepared to answer them. Good luck.